Your Honours, the contextual elements of crimes against humanity are established in this case because, first, there was an attack against the civilian population in the Philippines. The attack targeted civilians alleged to be involved in drug-related crimes and other forms of criminality. The Rome Statute crimes alleged in this case formed part of that attack. Second, the attack was widespread and systematic. And third, the attack was carried out pursuant to, or in furtherance of, a state or organisational policy. This policy was to neutralise alleged criminals in the Philippines through violent crimes, including murder. The evidence establishing the contextual elements are set out in paragraphs 71 to 86 of our pre-confirmation brief. In relation to the requirement of an attack, our case is that from at least the 1st of November 2011 to the 16th of March 2019, the Davao Death Squad, or DDS, and/or the National Network carried out an attack which targeted civilians alleged to be criminals. Your Honours have heard from my colleagues how from 2011 until 2016, the attack was concentrated in Davao City. Then, in 2016, when Mr. Duterte became president, he and his co-perpetrators expanded the attack nationwide. They used the national network to do this, which, as Mr. Jeremy has explained, was comprised of state actors such as law enforcement personnel, as well as non-police assets and hitmen. Your Honours, the locations of the murders contained in counts 1 to 3 of our document containing the charges are indicated on the map on your screens. They include 76 murders, which themselves satisfy the threshold of multiple acts making up a course of conduct. However, as Mr. Nichols has noted, the crimes in count 1 to 3 are representative and emblematic of a larger killing campaign. And the prosecution relies on a range of evidence to establish that the attack was made up of thousands of killings and other violent crimes under Article 7.1. This evidence includes datasets and the statements of documentation actors, the evidence of insider witnesses, expert analysis, and the admissions of Philippine state agencies in their public reporting. I will take your honours through some of this evidence now. During Mr. Duterte's mayoral period, hundreds of civilians alleged to be criminals were killed in Davao City. On your screens is a chart with data on extrajudicial killings in Davao based on public reporting. The data is recorded at tab 116. It shows that between 2012 and 2015, there are at least 274 extrajudicial killings in Davao City. This data is corroborated by DDS insider witnesses. Several DDS witnesses say that they each killed hundreds of alleged criminals while with the DDS. Your Honours can see on this slide quotes from one DDS witness. They estimate that, I quote, between 1,500 and 2,000 people, end quote, are buried at Laud Quarry. The quarry was only one of several places that the DDS dumped bodies in and around Davao. That's at tab 37. This witness said that they personally killed hundreds of people. They described their job as with the DDS as being, quote, just to kill small criminals, petty criminals. Out of the almost 300 people that I have killed, I never actually got to kill a drug lord, end quote. That's at tab 34. This witness's words make it clear that the target of the attack was people alleged to be criminals in Davao. Your Honours, another DDS witness who also killed hundreds of people said that the DDS targeted, I quote, suspected criminals in Davao City, including shabu users and pushers, end quote. That's at tab 58. Your Honours, as you have heard previously, Mr Duterte has himself publicly admitted that he killed around 1,700 people while he was mayor of Davao City. I quote, "They say I killed 700, they undercounted. Around 1,700, end quote. That's at tabs 10, 10.1, 10.2. This evidence, the data collected by independent organisations, the statements of insiders on the hundreds of people that they have each killed, and Mr Duterte's own admission of having killed 1,700 people while mayor of Davao all show that the attack was widespread in the mayoral period. And the attack continued to be widespread after Mr Duterte became president, when it expanded across the country. The victimisation expanded, with the hundreds killed during the mayoral period becoming thousands in the presidential period. Your Honours can see a map of the Philippines on the slide. The colours which will emerge show the locations and density of the killings in the anti-illegal drug campaign. Purple dots indicate an area with 1 to 10 killings, while yellow indicates 500 killings. This is how the killings progressed throughout the presidential period. Your Honours, this map is based on data collected by an independent organisation which recorded at least 5,823 anti-drug killings during the presidential period. This data is recorded at tab 104. The data shows that the attack during the presidential period was widespread. As Your Honours can see from the map, it occurred across the country. It occurred over multiple years, and thousands of civilians were killed. Mr Duterte's administration effectively admitted to the large volume of the attack. They admitted that thousands of individuals were killed in anti-drug operations while Mr Duterte was president. For example, in the Duterte administration's 2017 year-end report, which you can see on your screens, the administration admitted that 3,967 drug personalities died in anti-drug operations in the first year and a half of Mr Duterte's presidency. That's at tab 106. Similarly, the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, or PDEA, admitted that 5,281 drug personalities died in anti-drug operations in the first 2.5 years of Mr Duterte's presidency. This is at tab 98. These admissions corroborate the widespread nature of the attack. They show that thousands of individuals were killed. Your Honours, in addition to being widespread, the attack was also systematic from its origins and throughout the charge period. The features of DDS operations demonstrate this systematicity during the mayoral period. And these features can be found in our brief at paragraphs 35 to 36 and 88 to 98. Insider witnesses described how time and time again, killing operations followed the system set out on the screen. The same hierarchical structure was followed. As Mr Nichols explained, the orders flowed from Mr Duterte at the top, through a combination of other co-perpetrators, to the handler of the relevant DDS team, and finally to the physical perpetrators at the bottom. The DDS teams composed of police and non-police assets and hitmen who carried out the killings. The features of the killings were also often markedly similar. The identity or whereabouts of the victim was provided to the DDS by an informant. The perpetrators would frequently arrive to or flee the crime scene by motorcycle. They shot or stabbed their victims at close range. The victims were targeted on the basis that they were alleged to be drug users, pushers, or other criminals. and the DDS received a sum of reward money for each kill. When the attack expanded during the presidential period, it continued to be systematic because it remained highly organised, planned, and coordinated. Similar systems to the one I've just described in Davao were deployed during Mr. Duterte's presidency to implement the killings. Your Honours can see some of those features listed on your screens. As in Davao, victims were targeted on the basis that they were alleged to be drug users, pushers, or other criminals. The process for killing the targets was often markedly similar. First, the victims were identified by state actors as targets and listed. As Mr. Jeremy has outlined, high-value targets were often listed on the PRRD list. The targets of barangay clearance operations were often listed on local drug lists, such as local police station lists. Second, targets were killed in the context of so-called law enforcement operations. Police often tried to legitimise the operations, so they would stage a nanlaban or fight-back scenario to make them to appear to have been in self-defence. They would also plant evidence, such as drugs and guns, on the victims' bodies. And third, as in Davao, police and those working with them were often paid reward money per kill. Your Honours, these killings were not random or coincidental. Quite the opposite. Targets were pre-identified, listed, and then subject to operations based on that list. This clearly demonstrates the systematicity of the attack. Your Honours, the last point I would like to make about the attack relates to the evidence of an expert witness who specialises in political violence in the Philippines. This expert analysed data relating to armed encounters between the PNP and supposedly armed suspects. He compared data from before Mr. Duterte's presidency to during. And based on this comparison, he found that in the first 25 months of Mr. Duterte's presidency, the number of suspects killed by police increased by 590% across the Philippines. And that finding is at tab 68. Your Honours have heard Mr. Jeremy speak about Bulacan, a province immediately north of Metro Manila, where Mr. Duterte praised the killing of 32 civilians in police operations in 24 hours. The expert witness found that in Bulacan, police killings rose by 1,600% when Mr. Duterte became president. And that's at tab 121. The expert also compared data on Bulacan Police's use of deadly force to other countries and cities across the world. He used the metric of police killings per 100,000 population. The chart on your screens shows this comparison, which is at tab 121 again. The data on Bulacan is orange, while other countries and cities are blue. The orange bar on the left shows police use of deadly force in Bulacan before Mr. Duterte became president. You can see that with a fatality rate of over 1, it was already comparatively high. The orange bar on the right shows the dramatic increase in killings in Bulacan by police after Mr. Duterte became president. The expert concluded that, quote, "The only plausible explanation for such an extreme ratio is a widespread policy of extrajudicial executions." End quote. That's also tab 121. Your Honours, this leads us to the policy requirement for crimes against humanity in Article 7. Your Honours, the attack in this case was carried out pursuant to a policy to neutralise alleged criminals through violent crimes, including murder. The policy was also known as the Davao Formula or Model. Your Honours have heard about the origins of the policy in Davao City and how it was implemented by the local executive government. Mr. Nichols explained how Mr. Duterte, when Mayor of Davao City, established the Davao Death Squad to carry out the policy and kill criminals. The evidence establishing the state or organisational policy in this case is set out at paragraphs 77 to 84 of our brief. As the policy and the common plan were both to neutralise alleged criminals via violent crimes, there is some overlap between the evidence on each. I will set out some of that evidence now while discussing the policy, and then some later while discussing the common plan. The evidence includes Mr. Duterte's many public statements and speeches outlining the policy. It also includes the Command Memorandum Circular, which Mr. Jeremy mentioned earlier, witness accounts, speeches and statements by other co-perpetrators, the high-level of coordination between state actors. Sorry, Your Honours. I will start with Mr. Duterte's own speeches. Your Honours, Mr. Duterte made no secret of the policy, as is shown by the references in our brief to his many speeches outlining the policy. He made these speeches as Mayor of Davao, as a presidential candidate, and then as President of the Philippines. One example of a speech that Mr. Duterte made as Mayor was at a meeting on peace and order in Davao in October 2015. That is tab 13. Thank you.
The 8 hours yung mga nagdi-distribute ng droga sa Bolivar. Giving you 48 hours. Pag nakita ko kayo, papatayin ko kayo dito.
These are Mr. Duterte's own words. I quote, "I will kill you. That's the only formula that worked in my city." End quote. That is tab 133.
Prangka-prangkahan talaga. I will kill you. Kayong na mayor ako ngayon, presidente, yan din ang, that's the only formula that worked in my city.
Your Honours will recall that yesterday, Mr. Nichols played a series of Mr. Duterte's presidential campaign speeches. I want to take a moment to reflect on some of the key features of those speeches, which are at tabs 8, 12 and 14. First, Mr. Duterte frequently said that if elected as president, he would stop drugs and crime in the Philippines in 3 to 6 months. He frequently referenced his experience in Davao, where he admitted that he had killed criminals. He said that if elected, he would order the military and police to do the same nationwide. And he expressly stated that this would entail killing. Your Honours, Mr. Duterte's speeches make it clear that there was a policy to neutralise alleged criminals by violent means, including murder. And Mr. Duterte was not the only member of the Common Plan who disseminated the policy through public speeches and statements. In this video at tab 9, co-perpetrator Mr. Villarosa addresses a crowd of self-confessed drug addicts in Bacolod City and urges them to kill drug lords and burn their houses.
But on Thursday, National Police Chief Ronald Villarosa's rhetorics were far from toned down, as he told hundreds of self-confessed drug users and pushers in Bacolod City to kill drug lords.
Kilala mo si mga ito kung sino mga driver dito. Ano, gusto nyo patayin? Sino patayin? Patayin! Pwede mo kayo pumatay. Wala ko kayo. Tayo mo na biktima. Puntahan nyo. Buhusan nyo ng gasolina. Yung bahay, sindihan nyo.
Mr. De La Rosa made this speech on the 25th of August 2016. At the time, he was the chief of the Philippine National Police. Your Honours, the existence of the policy is also shown by the police directive which Mr. Jeremy spoke about earlier, Command Memorandum Circular number 16 of 2016. This is at tab 112. As Your Honours have heard, the day after Mr. Duterte became president, he appointed his longtime friend and colleague from Davao, his co-perpetrator, Mr. Ronald De La Rosa, as Chief of the Philippine National Police. On the same day, Mr. De La Rosa formalised the anti-drugs component of the policy by issuing this directive to the 180,000 police officers under his command. The circular directed police to pursue the neutralisation of illegal drug personalities. As Mr. Jeremy has outlined, the evidence shows that within law enforcement, neutralise meant and was understood as meaning to kill. Your Honours, the Command Memorandum Circular shows there was a policy to neutralise through violent crimes such as murder. I will now turn to part 2 of my presentation on Mr. Duterte's individual criminal responsibility. The prosecution's evidence on this is set out at paragraphs 5 to 70 of our brief. The prosecution alleges that Mr. Duterte indirectly co-perpetrated the crimes, ordered and/or induced the crimes, and/or aided and abetted the crimes. Today, in the interest of time, I will focus on indirect co-perpetration, and we rely on our brief for the other modes of liability. Your Honours, Mr. Duterte is an indirect co-perpetrator of the alleged crimes because, first, he agreed to a common plan to neutralise alleged criminals. Second, he and his fellow co-perpetrators jointly controlled a structure of power, namely the Davao Death Squad and the National Network, which they used to pursue the common plan. Third, Mr. Duterte made an essential contribution to the crimes within the framework of the common plan. And fourth, he did this with the requisite intent. Your Honours can see on your screens an excerpt from paragraph 4 of our document containing the charges. This sets out the scope of the common plan. The plan was to neutralise alleged criminals in the Philippines, including those perceived or alleged to be associated with drug use, sale or production through violent crimes, including murder. As Mr. Nichols has explained, Mr. Duterte and his co-perpetrators agreed to this plan in Davao City. Photos of the co-perpetrators in Davao City are displayed on your screens. They're a combination of trusted police officers, an individual from Mr. Duterte's mayoral office, an officer from the National Bureau of Investigation in Davao Region, and a lawyer who acted on behalf of certain members of the Davao Death Squad. In 2016, when Mr. Duterte became president, the members of the common plan remained largely the same. They were joined by a further 2 individuals, a senior police officer and a long-time colleague of the group from Davao City, who had worked with the DDS before the jurisdictional period. I will take your honours through some of the evidence which shows both the scope of the common plan and the co-perpetrators' agreement to it. In the interest of time, I will address some co-perpetrators, and we rely on our brief for the rest. That's at paragraphs 9 to 23 of our brief. On your screens is a photograph of Mr. Ronald De La Rosa. When Mr. De La Rosa was Davao City Police Chief, he developed Tokhang operations. As your honours have heard from Mr. Jeremy, Tokhang was a blueprint for police to implement killings later in the presidential period. When he was announced as Mr. Duterte's chosen PMP chief in May 2016, Mr. De La Rosa gave this interview, which is at tab 101. It shows that he wholeheartedly agreed to the common plan.
Patayan sa drugs. Patayan talaga ito sa drugs. So kayong mga drug lord dyan, humanda na kayo at talagang sasagasaan ko kayo.
On this slide is a photo of Isidro Lapena. Like Mr. De La Rosa, Mr. Lapena was well known to Mr. Duterte because he too had worked as Davao City Police Chief. In his case, from 1996 until 1998. In 2016, Mr. Duterte appointed Mr. Lapena as Director General of the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, or PDEA. PDEA is the lead anti-drug enforcement agency in the Philippines. 2 days after Mr. Lapena took his oath, he gave a speech to his PDEA subordinates. There is an excerpt from that speech on the slide. Quote, "Under then Mayor, we implemented strict law enforcement against illegal drug activities in Davao City. The President wants to replicate and expand what is being done in Davao. And that is precisely what I intend to do." End quote. That's tab 101. Also like Mr. De La Rosa, Vicente Danao was Davao City Police Chief during the mayoral period, in his case from 2013 to 2016. In November 2018, he was appointed Police Chief of Manila Police District, and he told reporters, quote, "If I discover anyone involved in drugs, especially those who distribute or just throw them around, son of a bitch, I will go after you, goddamn. I will kill you. Blatantly, I am saying that. Sons of bitches." End quote. That's tab 96. When Mr. Duterte became president, he appointed Vitaliano Aguirre II as Secretary of Justice. Mr. Aguirre has also publicly acknowledged the common plan and his agreement to it as a member of Mr. Duterte's administration.
Well, which do you want? We build first on do we build the prison facilities first, or do we go against these people? Choose. If you're in the Philippines, we will choose to kill these drug lords.
Quote, "In the Philippines, we will choose to kill these drug lords." End quote. That's tab 125. Your Honours, these speeches of co-perpetrators show both the scope of the common plan and those co-perpetrators' agreement to it. Your Honours, the next element of indirect co-perpetration is control of a structure of power. In the mayoral period, Mr. Duterte and his co-perpetrators controlled the DDS, which they used to pursue the common plan. There is a diagram of the DDS hierarchy on your screens. As the mayor of Davao City, Mr. Duterte sat at the apex of the formal and city structures. The law gave him formal operational, supervision and control over the police in Davao City. In addition to this de jure power, insider witnesses spoke about his de facto power over police and the DDS structure. Under Mr. Duterte were a combination of co-perpetrators from the Davao City Police Office and the Mayor's Office. Together with Mr. Duterte, they controlled the DDS teams beneath them. They controlled the will of the DDS perpetrators through a range of mechanisms. And these are set out in paragraph 38 of our brief and include threats to kill and actual killing. To illustrate this control, there are quotes from one witness on your screen. This witness said that when he was first told to kill, he did not want to. But, I quote, "I felt like I didn't have any other choice but to follow their orders. Duterte is the most powerful person in Davao City, and you had to do what he wanted. It wasn't possible not to not obey his command." End quote. This is tab 51. When Mr. Duterte became president, the co-perpetrators continued to control a structure of power. One of the first things that Mr. Duterte did with his new presidential powers was to appoint his co-perpetrators from Davao to national positions in government and law enforcement, which were key to the common plan. And after he appointed Mr. Villarosa as chief of the PMP, Mr. Villarosa used his new powers to move other police co-perpetrators into key policing roles. These new appointments expanded the geographic powers of the co-perpetrators and allowed them to create a larger network of individuals they controlled. Your Honours can see that structure of power on the chart on your screens. The co-perpetrators controlled the executive, they controlled the police, they controlled the Drug Enforcement Agency, the National Bureau of Investigation, and the Department of Justice. And they used this control to ensure that their subordinates carried out the plan to neutralise alleged criminals through violent crimes. For example, as PMP chief, Mr. Villarosa now controlled some 180,000 police officers, who, as you have heard, he directed to neutralise drug personalities. Mr. La Peña now controlled 1,800 Philippine drug enforcement personnel. They used these subordinates as physical perpetrators to commit the crimes. Mr. Aguirre, as Secretary of Justice, now had control of the National Prosecution Service. He used this control to ensure that, except for a handful of low-level perpetrators in notorious cases, the crimes were not prosecuted, and a climate of impunity prevailed. And the co-perpetrators controlled the will of the physical perpetrators. As in Davao City, low-level members of the national network risked losing their jobs or being killed if they did not comply. For example, Your Honours can see the evidence of a police insider on your screens. He said that if his boss did not kill enough people during police operations, he would lose his post and be replaced. I quote, "We were told that there should be 5 to 10 deaths per month. The regional director called him and told him that if there were no deaths or no recorded killings, then he would be relieved of his duty." End quote. That's tab 124. Now on your screens is the evidence of an individual who police suspected of involvement in drugs. He surrendered to police to avoid being killed. The police held his status as an alleged drug pusher against him and recruited him as an asset. They made him kill other civilians who were alleged to be involved with drugs. He said, quote, "I surrendered myself to them. I knew that they wanted to kill me, so I became an asset of theirs." End quote. That's at tab 22. Your Honours, I will now turn to the requirement of an essential contribution. Mr. Duterte made an essential contribution to the crimes within the framework of the Common Plan. And the prosecution has set out 10 of Mr. Duterte's contributions in our brief at paragraphs 44 to 58. Many of these have been discussed in the prosecution's presentations. For example, Mr. Nichols spoke about how Mr. Duterte designed and disseminated the policy in this case, which is point A on the slide. He also spoke about point B, how Mr. Duterte established and oversaw the DDS. I have just addressed point E, on the appointment of key personnel to positions which were crucial to the execution of the crimes. Mr. Jeremy has spoken about point J, how Mr. Duterte publicly named so-called high-value targets who were then killed. And all members of the prosecution have touched upon point H, Mr. Duterte's public statements authorizing, condoning, and encouraging killing. Your Honours, without Mr. Duterte's essential contribution, the crimes in this case would not have been committed, or they would have been committed in a significantly different way. We can see this in the evidence of low-level members of the Davao Death Squad and the National Network, who said that Mr. Duterte's conduct had a causal effect on their perpetration of the crimes. You can see on the screens, one low-level perpetrator during the mayoral period said, I quote, "I was confident to continue killing people because anyway, we wouldn't be arrested for that," end quote. That's tab 38. A low-level police perpetrator during the presidential period was asked about the impact Mr. Duterte's public speeches had on his team, including when deciding to kill someone. He responded, quote, "It did have an effect on me because it's like I was saying to myself, well, even the president, he himself is ready to do something like this, and who am I?" End quote. That's tab 142. A senior police officer during the presidential period was asked why his police unit started killing in July 2016. He responded, I quote, "Because of the directive of the president," end quote. That's tab 120. Your Honours, from everything you have heard over the past 2 days, there can be no doubt about Mr. Duterte's knowledge and intent. Mr. Duterte meant to engage in the conduct that has been charged in this case. He intended that the crimes would be committed, and he was aware that they would be committed as a result of implementing the common plan. Mr. Duterte knew about the fundamental features of the Davao Death Squad and the National Network that enabled the co-perpetrators to control the physical perpetrators. And he was aware of the factual circumstances that enabled the co-perpetrators to control the crimes. Mr. Duterte knew because he himself established the DDS to kill people. He repeatedly broadcast his intention to implement the common plan nationally if elected president. He made it clear that this would involve killing. Once he was president, he moved his trusted co-perpetrators from Davao into key national positions. And as the number of killings rose, Mr. Duterte persisted with the common plan. He praised the 32 killings in a one-time big-time operation in Bulacan. He publicly named so-called high-value targets. He promised to protect police. And as Your Honours have heard, Mr. Duterte has admitted to many of these things. Your Honours, I will conclude my presentation by recalling 2 items. The first is Mr. Duterte's presidential campaign promise that he would stop drugs and crime in the Philippines within 3 to 6 months. And the second is the spread of killings during the first 6 months of Mr. Duterte's presidency.
I promise you, hindi naman believe yung ibang tao. Sabi ko, I would stop drugs and crime, criminality in 3 to 6 months.
That concludes the prosecution's submissions on the merits. Thank you, Your Honours.
This big. This big.
You already know that atoms and particles inside that one package, but they're so much smaller. Look at a single strand of your hair. Now imagine that single hair is as big across as the entire Earth is wide. Now zoom in. The size of the stick itself.
Okay, done.
Madam President, Your Honors, by way of an opening statement, we convey the views and concerns of the 497 victims authorized to participate in these proceedings. At the outset, Your Honors, we communicate the very deep disappointment of the victims at the decision allowing Rodrigo Duterte not to be present in this stage of confirmation of charges. The sight of Mr. Duterte being read and being confronted with the grave and horrible charges against him would have constituted a vital component of justice for the victims. This case symbolically represents the last boat that the victims can board to go on a journey in search of justice for their loved ones who were brutally killed upon the orders of Mr. Duterte. If this chamber prevents the boat from sailing by not confirming the charges, the victims will forever be moored in an island where the nights are filled with the screams and cries of their massacred loved ones. There is absolutely no other recourse for the victims. No less than former Philippine Justice Secretary Crispin Remulla admitted just a few months ago that the door to domestic justice is permanently closed for victims of the Duterte extrajudicial killings. Remulla declared, and we quote, "It is difficult to prove the case here and build up the case because those who need to speak are involved in the crime. There's nothing, not even a police report. You don't have a scene of the crime, you don't have ballistics, you don't have DNA." Remulla further declared, and I quote, "Everything that could be erased was erased so that the cases would not push through. That is why this has reached the ICC." Under the Philippine justice system, Your Honors, no criminal case can reach the courts unless they are initiated and filed by the Department of Justice or the Office of the Ombudsman. From Justice Secretary, Remulla has been appointed as Ombudsman. So the two gatekeepers of justice are successively occupied by a ranking official who has declared that there is absolutely no hope for domestic justice for the victims. If the charges are not confirmed in this case, one of the gravest concerns of the victims is that Mr. Duterte will return to the Philippines as a conquering hero. He will resume preaching his gospel of impunity. In fact, if Mr. Duterte could threaten to slap the judges of this court, which he did while he was president, this chamber should imagine the kind of terror-filled threats and the violent actions that can easily be used against the victims if the suspect walks free from this court. If the charges are not confirmed, it is a very serious concern of the victims that Mr. Duterte will be portrayed in history by his multitude of followers as the leader who vanquished the ICC and who cleansed his country of 30,000 rapists, murderers, and dangerous criminals, which were the scornful words he sweepingly used against all those who were killed in his murderous spree. Your Honors, Mr. Duterte has been in detention here in The Hague for almost a year now. But there has been no peace and rest for the victims. From the time their loved ones were killed and continuously up to this time, they lived in constant fear for their lives. The arrest and detention of Mr. Duterte has not stopped impunity in the Philippines. The virus of impunity that he spread all over the country has become a cancer that has metastasized, infecting millions of Filipinos. Mr. Duterte has created clones of himself. He converted millions of peace-loving citizens into bloodthirsty disciples who have become converts to the belief that violence and killings are valid solutions to societal problems. The killings masterminded by Mr. Duterte continue to have consequences for the victims even to this day because of his clones. These mini Dutertes harass, threaten, or commit outright violence against the victims and their families. As shown by the number of victims participating in this proceeding so far, many still fear to come out and tell their stories of how their lives became a living hell as a result of Mr. Duterte's crimes and because they are constantly terrified of being targeted with violence by Duterte fanatics. Many victims have been hesitant to participate in this ICC case because they live in communities that thrive with Duterte clones. They see the halls of power of their country teeming with Duterte disciples. They see and hear senators, congresspersons, mayors, governors, and powerful public figures who are mini Dutertes. The daughter of Mr. Duterte is the vice president, and she has just recently declared that she is running for president in 2028. One Duterte son is a congressman. Another is the Davao City Mayor, and his grandchildren occupy positions of power. The plague of impunity has spread not only among Filipinos in the Philippines, but even among expatriate Filipinos in faraway lands like here in The Hague. When we reported to the victims that we, their external legal representatives, feel like fugitives who avoid our own countrymen here in The Hague because chances are they are Duterte clones, they expressed their utmost concern that if we, their lawyers, feel threatened by mini Dutertes in a foreign country, we should imagine the far more intense fear they live with every day in their communities teeming with mini Dutertes. The victims also wish to convey that if the judges of this honorable chamber can be subjected to online harassment by Duterte clones, we should imagine the level of vulnerability the victims are exposed to in their poor villages. Your Honors, there is only one solution to stop the impunity propagated by Mr. Duterte from continuing to bring harm and suffering to the victims. And that is for this honorable chamber to confirm the charges so that witnesses can testify and evidence can be presented on the horrible crimes committed by Mr. Duterte. The testimonies and evidence presented will inoculate these mini Dutertes from the virus of impunity that has infected them. When they will see and hear the utter cruelty, the sheer brutality, in other words, the brazen inhumanity of the crimes committed by Mr. Duterte, and the humanity of those whose lives were violently taken, it will rekindle the embers of humanity that still remain in their hearts. Many of these mini Dutertes or Duterte clones are actually victims of massive doses of fake news widely circulated online. They need to be vaccinated with the truth, and the truth vaccine can only come from the testimonies of victims and evidence presented in a trial before this court. Truth is the antidote to the virus of impunity, Your Honors. The victims dread a future where charges are not confirmed in this case. It will mean that the virus of impunity will continue to spread and in fact, many more. Victims fear that Duterte clones will become an even bigger group that can elect another apostle of impunity as the Philippines' next leader. If that happens, an even more serious condition of impunity can take place in the Philippines, possibly worse than the orgy of violence that happened from 2011 to 2019, and this time there will be no ICC to run to for assistance and help. The victims humbly beseech this honorable chamber to reaffirm the two crucial objectives of the ICC identified in the preamble of the Rome Statute. First, to prosecute and punish the most serious crimes that deeply shock the conscience of humanity. And second, to put an end to impunity and to contribute to the prevention of crimes of unimaginable atrocities. If this chamber confirms the charges, this court will achieve its first objective of prosecuting and, if convicted, punishing Mr. Duterte for the unspeakable crimes he is charged with. But achieving the first objective will not automatically make this court attain its second objective. Merely putting forward the evidence gathered and the theory of liability of the prosecution will not necessarily resolve the second objective. This court should allow victims to testify, and the record of the proceedings must reflect the harrowing experiences of those impacted by humanity. It is the brutality. In other words, the utter inhumanity of the crimes masterminded by Mr. Duterte. So that the people who adore and idolize him, the people who have become disciples of impunity, will see for themselves the inhumanity of the suspect. For this to happen, the charges should all be confirmed. The virus of impunity that has spread all over the Philippines is very grave and serious, Your Honors. Imagine a leader like Mr. Duterte, who proudly and publicly proclaimed his aspirations of following the footsteps of Adolf Hitler when he said, quote, "Hitler massacred 3 million Jews. Now there are 3 million drug addicts. I'd be happy to slaughter them," unquote. And yet, he is worshipped by a huge number of Filipinos. In so many countries, you will need to hide your adoration of Hitler. Mr. Duterte flaunted it, and his fanatics are unaffected by it. Mr. Duterte has pronounced so many other horrible declarations meant to promote and encourage impunity, as it will be detailed tomorrow by my colleagues. And yet, he is idolized by a multitude of Filipinos. The defense will claim that he was merely bombastic and acerbic when he made these statements. But if he were merely being pompous and flippant, the people who were killed should be alive and laughing today at his supposed pranks and stunts. Mr. Duterte did not only order the mass killing of people suspected of being drug personalities, Your Honors. He smeared them with accusations of being rapists, murderers, and dangerous criminals. Mr. Duterte imposed an inflexible condemnation that if you are a drug personality, you are automatically a dangerous criminal who has engaged in unimaginable atrocities. The families of those killed did not only suffer the loss of a loved one, their families were even disgraced with being associated with a rapist, murderer, or dangerous criminal. Even after their loved ones were murdered, many families were subjected to deplorable injustices. Instead of gunshot wounds as cause of death in their death certificates, families were shocked to see pneumonia, heart attack, stroke, sepsis, and other false causes of death that were instead written down. Other families were charged substantial amounts. Some the impoverished families could not afford, just to retrieve the bodies of their loved ones. Then, Your Honors, a young man and his common-law wife were sleeping in their shanty when men in civilian clothes knocked down the door to their house. The men dragged the wife out of the room. The husband was already surrendering, and he even started to strip naked to show he had no drugs or firearm on his body. He said in the Filipino language, "Sir, malinis po ako, maghuhubad ako, sir." Translation in English, "Sir, I am clean. I will strip naked, sir." Still without mercy, the men shot and killed him. After killing the husband, they arrested the wife and accused her with falsified and non-bailable charges. When the deceased mother and cousin went to the police station to find out what happened to the young man, because they were not in the scene of the crime when it happened, the two were also summarily arrested and charged with fabricated crimes. If the Honorable Chamber confirms the charges in this case, the witnesses and evidence will show that those who were smeared by Mr. Duterte before they were killed, they were inside their houses, sleeping peacefully with their families, eating meals with their loved ones, playing with their children, or hugging their wives. Others were merely walking along the street, having snacks at the roadside eatery, or plying the road, earning a poor man's living. They were all doing ordinary, peaceful, and plain human activities. Confirming the charges will restore the dignity of those who were killed and the honor of their families. The prejudice suffered by the families of those killed did not begin and end with the killings of their loved ones. Each killing set off a chain reaction that is continuously churning out a daily crucible of harm, damage, and loss. By masterminding the mass murder of mere suspects, Mr. Duterte has brought irreparable and endless harm to the families. An overwhelming majority of those killed were the sole breadwinners of poor families. These families were dependent on each day's wage for their daily sustenance. They were hand-to-mouth families. With the death of their breadwinners, the widowed spouses, a majority of whom are women, have had to take on the roles of two parents. On top of taking care of their children and maintaining the household, the widowed spouses now have the additional burden of being breadwinners for their families. One missing parental limb. Losing a parent under very dire economic conditions, and under the most violent circumstances, results in wounds that will never heal and that will absolutely render them handicapped for life. And then there's the indescribable anguish of parents who lost a child. No parent is supposed to outlive a child. Parents suffer a lifetime of grief when a child dies ahead of them, and the lifetime grief is unimaginably worse when a child dies under the most inhuman circumstances. The crimes masterminded by Mr. Duterte did not only affect individuals but whole communities. Across the Philippines, numerous urban communities of the most impoverished villages were scarred by the violence and abuses wrought by a lawless anti-drug campaign that further worsened the misery and trauma of residents in marginalized communities. In one illustrative instance, Your Honors, after the father of a family was killed inside his house by police officers, the entire neighborhood was so traumatized that for almost 3 months, and during the coldest months in the Philippines, they abandoned their houses at night and instead slept in the open public market. They did not feel secure inside their houses because there would be no witnesses if the police would just barge in and shoot at them. In the public market, the presence of many witnesses, they thought, will deter the police from shooting and killing them. It is also the victim's view, Your Honors, that the charges should be confirmed because the resulting presentation of witnesses and evidence during the trial will force police and other law enforcement officers to confront the brazen depravity of the killing of civilians that they either personally committed or allowed to be committed during the Duterte reign of terror. In one operation, the police summarily killed 3 men, 2 brothers and 1 friend, in the very early morning. The police declared that the 3 were non-laban. They fought back. But the neighbors saw otherwise. The whole neighborhood was so horrified at the macabre treatment of one of the fatalities. The bullet-ridden body of one of the 3 men was brought out from the 2nd floor window and dropped to the ground because the police could not bring the body out through the doorway. When the body hit the ground, the neighbors recoiled at hearing the body emit a cry. Aray! Translation in English, ouch! The man was still alive when his body was thrown to the ground, and the police just left him to bleed to death. The trial will hold a mirror to the police force and compel them to see how they were turned into executioners and assassins, and their organization transformed into a gigantic criminal organization or turned into a killing machine by Mr. Duterte. The Philippine National Police and the drug enforcement agencies have not made any initiative to purify the corrupted minds of their officers and personnel to our knowledge. The trial in this case will be a tremendous teaching opportunity that can work to rectify the warped and depraved minds of Philippine security officers. The charges need to be confirmed, Your Honors, for the sake of the entire country, which has been desensitized or made numb by the massive incidents of impunity and the glorification of impunity promoted by Mr. Duterte. The whole Philippines needs to know the real story during those bloody years. There has been no opportunity for the entire country to really find out the whole truth of what happened. It has been hush-hush, tidbits of sporadic news, and always drowned out by trolls who mass produce and broadcast false, fake, and fabricated news. The victims also attach a very important historical significance to this case. If the chamber confirms the charges, the trial proceedings will produce a historical record of the most bloody period of post-war Philippine history, a duty that the Philippine justice system has refused to perform. The historical account on the mass murder of so many Filipinos during the Duterte regime needs to be accessible to our future generations, just like the Nuremberg trials and the Tokyo trials, so that they will learn from it and not repeat the same mistake of selecting and glorifying leaders who preach and practice impunity. The prosecution has presented 78 instances of murder and attempted murder, clarifying that these incidents are only representatives of the extent of the crimes committed against thousands of civilians, Your Honors. The victims beseech the Honorable Chamber to remember that Mr. Duterte's bloody rule, both in Davao City and nationwide, resulted in as many as 30,000 victims of killings, more than 300,000 victims of arbitrary imprisonment, and unaccounted numbers of victims of torture, sexual assault, and other forms of crimes against humanity. For many families in the Philippines, the charges brought for confirmation in these proceedings represent only a fraction of the reality the victims have endured. The victims beseech the Honorable Chamber to remember the hundreds of thousands of victims are banking on vicarious justice from this case. Finally, Your Honors,
Excuse me, Counsel, you have 5 minutes left.
Thank you. Finally, Your Honors, the victims wish to humbly underline that what is ultimately at stake in these proceedings is the supreme of all forms of human rights, the right to life. The right to life is the very foundation of every civilized society. The ancestors of every nation fought against invaders, colonizers, despotic monarchs, and fascist leaders in order to secure the right to life of their families, their communities, and the future generations. The heroes of every country sacrificed their lives to defend the right to life of their people. We as citizens of modern societies are inheritors and beneficiaries of the sacrifices of our ancestors who bequeathed to us the right to life. We owe it to them to defend the supreme legacy for our generation and for the generations to come. For the past few years, Your Honors, we have seen an increasing number of nation leaders who time-traveled from the Dark Ages and now swagger in modern times as if they own people's lives. These brutal and cruel leaders must be held to account for their brazen disregard of humankind's right to life. Our ancestors fought in the battlefield to secure a right to life. In these modern times, the battleground for the fight to protect our right to life is within the four walls of this honorable court. May the God of life, the God of humanity, guide the honorable members of this chamber. Thank you, Your Honors.
Thank you guys for watching.